All right, let's jump into this fascinating concept, infinite games, from Simon Sinek's book. It's a whole new take on how we think about success. The excerpts you sent over are really intriguing.
Oh, it's a powerful framework, for understanding not just competition, but really even our everyday choices. Sinek's argument is that recognizing the infinite nature of so many of these games we're in, from business to our personal lives, well, it's crucial for creating lasting impact.
So right off the bat, Sinek makes this distinction. Finite games versus infinite games. And I think we all get the finite ones. There's rules, a clear winner, a loser. Like, picture a basketball game or, a round of poker.
Exactly, define boundaries,
Yeah.
right. But then he says there are these infinite games where the objective, it kind of shifts. It's less about a single victory and more about staying in the game, adapting, being able to outlast, the challenges. Geopolitics, that's a great example. It's an ongoing process. There's no final scoreboard.
And this is where it gets interesting, right? Sinek argues that a lot of leaders get tripped up. They apply finite thinking to these infinite scenarios.
You're spot on. They become fixated on short-term wins. They obsess over beating their rivals. And in doing so, they end up building cultures that, well, they actually stifle innovation over the long haul.
He uses a very powerful example, the Vietnam War. The U.S. went in with this goal of winning, but North Vietnam, they were playing a completely different game. It was about survival. And Sinek says this clash of mindsets, that's what led to the U.S. exhausting its resources, its will to even keep going.
A sobering reminder, isn't it, of how that finite approach can backfire. So Sinek proposes an alternative, the just cause.
Okay, so break that down. What is a just cause? It's more than just a fancy mission statement.
Oh, absolutely. It's a vivid and aspirational vision. It's what guides your actions. Think of it like a compass pointing you beyond just profits or products. It's about creating a lasting, positive mark on the world.
Sinek points to Apple in the early days. Their just cause was empowering individuals through computers, a stand against Big Brother. And he argues this is what fueled their innovative spirit, helped them outmaneuver companies like Microsoft, who, in his view, were stuck just reacting to Apple's moves.
And that's such a valuable lesson, not just for CEOs or, big companies. Having a purpose that goes beyond just winning that just cause that can provide the fuel, the drive to really thrive in the infinite game.
Now, another key to this whole infinite game approach is what Sinek calls trusting teams.
Ah, yes, that's critical. We're talking about creating an environment where people, individuals, feel safe being vulnerable, admitting when they've messed up, asking for help without fear of judgment.
So it's about that psychological safety leading to better communication, more effective problem solving.
Exactly. Sinek shares this great example from Shell Oil. They transformed the culture on the URSA oil rig. By encouraging vulnerability, even emotional expression, they created a safer and more collaborative environment.
And, I mean, it produced real results, right? Better performance, fewer accidents.
Yeah.
So investing in a team's well-being, it's not just some soft stuff.
Yeah.
It has a direct impact on the bottom line.
URSA example is so powerful because it happened in an industry with, incredibly high stakes. It really demonstrates that even in those toughest settings, that trust can be a complete game changer.
Let's shift gears a bit to something Sinek calls ethical fading. This feels, well, incredibly relevant today.
Ethical fading, it's that subtle process where as short-term results take over, the ethical lines start to blur. Companies start prioritizing profits over people, and this leads to scandals, a loss of trust. It ultimately harms the very systems that they operate within.
The example he uses is Mylan, the company that makes the EpiPen. They aggressively raised prices, it seemed, to meet their bonus targets, almost disregarding, or at least appearing to, the impact on people's health.
A classic case, I think, of how finite thinking can lead to that ethical fading. And it damages a company's reputation. It makes you ask, at what cost are we chasing these goals? Are we willing to sacrifice our values for some short-term gain?
This brings us to another concept, worthy rivals.
Mm.
So it's not just about, like, crushing the competition.
Not at all. Infinite game players, they actually recognize worthy rivals. They see them as those who push them to improve. The focus shifts from simply winning to continuous progress, and that elevates the entire game.
He uses the example of those tennis legends, Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova. They had this fierce rivalry, but it wasn't about destroying each other. It was about constantly raising their own game.
Precisely. Competition, but it spurred growth, not this kind of zero-sum battle. It's a good reminder that in so many fields, strong competitors actually benefit everyone. They drive innovation, they set a higher bar.
Okay, so we've got finite versus infinite games, the just cause, trusting teams, ethical fading, and worthy rivals. Ready for another one? Sinek introduces something he calls cause blindness.
Ah, yes. Cause blindness. It's when we become so fixated on our own cause, on being right, that we become blind to the merits of any opposing viewpoints.
Like wearing blinders. We miss out on learning opportunities because we're so convinced that we have all the answers already.
Especially dangerous, I think, in today's world, which is so polarized. We have to remember that even those we disagree with, they can offer valuable insights. Embracing diverse viewpoints, that's vital for navigating the infinite game.
And that kind of leads us to Sinek's concept of existential flexibility.
Existential flexibility. It's about embracing change, being willing to adapt your strategy as the world, it keeps evolving. It's the opposite of clinging to those outdated models when everything else is shifting.
He uses Kodak's downfall as a cautionary tale.
Hmm.
They invented the digital camera, but they failed to adapt to that whole digital photography revolution. And it ultimately led to their decline.
A stark reminder, right, that in the infinite game, if you're standing still, you're actually falling behind. We have to be willing to challenge those assumptions, to experiment, to evolve, just to stay in the game.
So all of this points to like a really big question. What does it actually require to lead with an infinite mindset?
It takes courage. The courage to defy those traditional notions of business, to embrace a more purpose-driven approach, prioritizing long-term value, not just for shareholders, but for all stakeholders.
Sinek uses the example of CVS. They made the decision to stop selling cigarettes, even though it meant potential financial losses. This bold move, it aligned with their stated purpose, promoting health. It was a commitment to the infinite game of building a healthier society.
A powerful demonstration, right? A company making a difficult, but ultimately a really beneficial decision that aligned with their just cause. It's about making choices that contribute to that bigger goal, not just taking the easy path.
Now, we've been looking at these concepts mostly in the context of business, but Sinek argues that an infinite mindset can change our personal lives too. So what does that look like?
Well, it means applying these principles to areas like parenting, our friendships, even how we approach our own learning. By adopting that infinite mindset, we can build deeper connections, we can contribute to a better future for those around us.
He contrasts finite parenting, which often focuses on those external markers of success, with an infinite approach, helping children discover their passions, helping them live fulfilling lives.
It's about shifting the focus from just results to the process, from winning to growing. In the infinite game of parenting, the goal is to equip children with the skills and values they need to navigate their own paths. So, diving deeper into Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game, our talk about actionable wisdom, it's a great place to start thinking about, well, actually applying this infinite mindset.
And we briefly touched on this idea of the chief visionary officer, the CEO, and how it's distinct from the traditional CEO role, which is often more focused on just the executive duties.
Right, and Sinek uses a really interesting historical example to highlight this. He compares the leadership styles of George Washington and John Adams during the American Revolution.
Okay, that comparison has me curious. How does it illuminate leading with an infinite mindset?
Well, he argues that while both men, were brilliant leaders in their own right, their strengths were different. Washington, he excelled at articulating the vision, galvanizing people to action. He was the embodiment of that CVO role, safeguarding the just cause.
Which, in the case of the American Revolution, was the pursuit of independence from British rule.
Right, exactly. Washington understood that this struggle, it was more than just battles. It was about securing a future where the colonies could govern themselves, forge their own destiny. He was playing the infinite game of nation building.
And what about Adams? Where did he fit into this game?
Adams, he was brilliant at strategy, policy, administration. He mastered the finite game, excelling at those tasks needed to achieve specific goals. I mean, he was instrumental in drafting the Declaration of Independence, establishing the framework for this, brand new nation.
So it sounds like they represented two sides of the same coin, both essential for success in this grand endeavor.
That's it. Washington provided the inspiring vision, the just cause that rallied the people, while Adams built the structures, the strategies to turn that vision into reality. Together, they formed this formidable partnership, each playing their part in the infinite game of, well, birthing a new nation.
It's amazing how this historical parallel reflects that modern concept of the CVO collaborating with, say, the COO or the CFO. It underlines how you need diverse leadership skills, balanced perspectives to achieve sustainable success in, well, really any infinite game.
Indeed. And it highlights a key takeaway. Leadership isn't about finding one perfect person who embodies all the qualities. It's about building a leadership team with complementary strengths, each member contributing their unique talents to pursuing that just cause.
Now, Sinek also addresses the challenge, right? Leading with an infinite mindset when you've got pressure from investors, from the market, who are often laser focused on those immediate results. How does he reconcile that tension?
He acknowledges that the pressure is real, especially for publicly traded companies where it's all about those quarterly earnings reports. But he argues that giving in to that pressure, sacrificing long-term aspirations for those short-term gains, it ultimately leads to disaster.
It's like winning a small battle but losing the entire war.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of a farmer who's pressured to maximize crop yield. They could overuse fertilizers, pesticides. It might boost production briefly, but it depletes the soil, makes the land unsustainable in the long run.
That's a powerful image, illustrating the dangers of those short-sighted decisions. But how can leaders actually withstand this pressure and stay focused on the infinite game?
Sinek outlines a few strategies. First, it's about building a strong organizational culture that prioritizes the just cause, that values that long-term thinking. It means articulating the vision clearly, celebrating milestones along the way, and rewarding behaviors that support that larger purpose.
So creating an environment where everyone understands that the game is bigger than just hitting quarterly targets. It's about building something that's truly lasting and meaningful.
You got it. And this cultural transformation, it often extends beyond the company itself. It's about engaging with investors who share that long-term perspective, who are willing to support the company's just cause, even if it means, potentially foregoing some of those immediate gains.
It sounds like finding the right investors is crucial, those who align with the company's vision, who understand the whole infinite game framework.
Absolutely. It's about creating alliances with investors who are in it for the long haul, who embrace the company's mission and are willing to weather those market fluctuations.
This brings us back to the importance of trusting teams, right?
Mhm.
Sinek argues that building a culture of trust within an organization that's essential for navigating those, well, the inherent challenges of the infinite game. Why is that trust so critical in this context?
Because trust is the foundation for psychological safety. It allows teams to communicate openly and honestly, to take risks, to learn from their mistakes without fear of punishment. And in the constantly changing landscape of the infinite game, creating this kind of environment is crucial.
He uses that fascinating story of the Shell URSA, that offshore oil rig that underwent this remarkable cultural transformation.
Oh, right. Sinek described how the URSA, even though it operates in this, highly technical, potentially dangerous environment, they dramatically improved safety and performance by fostering a culture of vulnerability and emotional expression.
It seems counterintuitive. You don't usually associate, an oil rig with emotional intelligence.
Exactly. That's why this story is so powerful. It shows that even in the toughest settings, nurturing that trust, that psychological safety, can be completely transformative.
Sinek details how this shift was facilitated by Claire Neuer, a Holocaust survivor and a leadership consultant. She encouraged the crew to connect on a deeper level, to share their feelings, their vulnerabilities.
And initially, her methods were met with skepticism. Many of the crew members, they were used to that, that rugged, tough guy culture of the oil industry. They resisted this idea of emotional transparency.
But Neuer, she persisted. And slowly, this remarkable shift began to happen. The crew started to open up to each other, sharing their anxieties, their uncertainties, their personal struggles.
And as they did, this sense of camaraderie, of trust, it blossomed. They realized that beneath those tough exteriors, they shared a common humanity. They were all facing similar challenges. And that newfound vulnerability, it led to better collaboration, improved communication, and a stronger commitment to safety.
And the results were really impressive. The URSA went from being this, accident-prone and inefficient rig to becoming one of the safest and most productive in Shell's entire fleet. It's a testament to the power of trust, how it can revolutionize any team, no matter the industry or the task.
It reminds us that nurturing that human element within an organization, it's not just a nice to have. It's absolutely essential for achieving lasting success in that infinite game.
Okay, so we've talked about the CVO concept, the importance of that long-term vision, the power of those trusting teams. Sinek then revisits this idea of ethical fading, which we touched upon earlier. He argues that a finite mindset, with its fixation on short-term gains, it can create an environment where ethical boundaries become blurred. Why is this such a concern in the context of infinite games?
Ethical fading, it's a slippery slope. It can erode trust, damage reputations, and ultimately threaten a company's ability to stay in the game. When winning at all costs becomes the priority, ethical considerations, they get pushed aside in that pursuit of immediate results.
And he uses that example of Milan, the pharmaceutical company that came under fire for dramatically hiking the price of the EpiPen, that life-saving allergy medication. Their actions seem to prioritize profits over, the well-being of their customers. And it sparked public outrage, accusations of corporate greed.
It's a stark example of what can happen when a company loses its ethical compass. Mylan's actions, they didn't just hurt their reputation, they triggered a backlash from consumers, regulators, even lawmakers. It shows how that finite mindset, that fixation on short-term profits, can backfire and have lasting consequences.
It really underscores the need to embed ethics into every decision, especially when you're under pressure to meet those ambitious goals. But how can leaders prevent that ethical fading within their organizations?
Sinek emphasizes the importance of strong ethical leadership, setting a clear standard from the top. It's not just about talking about values, it's about living them out in every choice, in every action.
Leading by example, showing that ethical behavior isn't negotiable, even when you're facing tough decisions.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of accountability where people feel empowered to speak up when they see something that doesn't align with the company's values.
And this ties back to the importance of psychological safety of those trusting teams, right? When people feel safe to raise concerns without fear of retaliation, it creates a more ethical, a more sustainable work environment.
And it involves recognizing that ethical behavior isn't just about avoiding scandals, it's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it might hurt the bottom line.
Sinek points to the example of CVS, the pharmacy chain that made that bold decision to stop selling cigarettes, even though it meant potentially losing revenue. It aligned with their stated mission of promoting health and well-being. It was a statement about their commitment to the infinite game.
It was a gutsy move that sent a clear message to their customers, their employees, and the industry as a whole. It showed that they were willing to put their values ahead of short-term profits.
All right, so we've covered the CVO, the importance of long-term vision, those trusting teams, and ethical leadership. Now, Sinek introduces this concept of worthy rivals as being a critical element of playing the infinite game. Can you unpack that term a bit?
Sure. A worthy rival, it's not just a competitor you're trying to defeat. It's an adversary that pushes you to improve, to innovate. They have strengths that challenge you to up your own game, that inspire you to reach for excellence.
He uses that legendary rivalry between tennis greats Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova as an example. Their intense competition, it actually drove both players to become better. It ended up enriching the sport as a whole.
Their rivalry, it wasn't about destroying each other. It was about that constant striving to be better, to push the boundaries of what was possible in tennis. They recognized each other's talent and used that competition as fuel for growth.
It's a great reminder that competition, when approached with the right mindset, can actually be a positive force. It can drive innovation, it can raise standards, and it can create a more dynamic and engaging playing field.
And in the infinite game, where the goal is to stay in the game, to make a lasting contribution, having those worthy rivals, it's essential. They provide the motivation, the challenge, the inspiration to keep striving for more.
So it's about shifting the focus from winning at all costs to achieving excellence, both for yourself and for the game itself.
Right. It requires a certain level of humility, recognizing that even our rivals can teach us something. It's about embracing learning from those who challenge us and using that knowledge to enhance our own performance.
Sinek also warns against something he calls cause blindness, which can hinder our ability to recognize and learn from those worthy rivals. What is cause blindness and why is it so detrimental?
Cause blindness, it's when we become so fixated on our own cause, on our belief that we're right, that we completely dismiss the merits of any opposing viewpoint. We write off anyone who disagrees with us as being wrong or foolish or even morally corrupt.
It's like having those blinders on, blocking our ability to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And this blindness, it can be particularly dangerous in the infinite game. It leads to arrogance, stagnation, and a lack of innovation. We become so convinced that we're right that we stop learning and growing.
And we miss out on valuable insights that could help us refine our approach, that could help us stay ahead in the game.
Right. Sinek stresses the importance of cultivating intellectual humility, recognizing that even those we disagree with might hold perspectives that could benefit us. It's about being open to challenges, learning from those who hold different views, and constantly questioning our own assumptions.
This connects back to the idea of embracing diverse perspectives that we talked about before. It's crucial for navigating the complexities of the infinite game and avoiding the pitfalls of that cause blindness.
And it involves recognizing that the infinite game isn't a zero-sum game. There's room for multiple players to thrive, to contribute to the advancement of the game itself.
Okay, so we've explored worthy rivals and the dangers of cause blindness. Now, Sinek emphasizes the importance of existential flexibility for thriving in the infinite game. Can you break down that term and explain why it's so crucial?
Existential flexibility, it's about being adaptable. It's about the willingness to change course when the situation demands it. It's the opposite of clinging to those old models and strategies that are no longer serving us well.
He uses the example of Kodak, the once dominant photography company that failed to adapt to the digital revolution, even though they actually invented the digital camera.
Mm.
Their inability to let go of the past, their attachment to their existing business model, it ultimately led to their downfall.
It's a cautionary tale. It shows the importance of embracing change, of being willing to disrupt ourselves before someone else does. In the constantly evolving world of the infinite game, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind.
It requires a willingness to challenge your own assumptions, to experiment, to be open to new possibilities. And it requires the courage to abandon familiar ways of doing things, even those that have been successful in the past.
Sinek argues that this flexibility is especially important for leaders who need to guide their organizations through periods of rapid change and uncertainty. It's about having the vision to anticipate shifts in the market, the courage to make those tough choices, and the humility to learn from your mistakes.
It sounds like quite a challenge, requiring a blend of vision, courage, and humility.
It is, and that's why Sinek emphasizes that leading with an infinite mindset, it's not for the faint of heart. It requires a deep commitment to the just cause, a willingness to challenge the status quo, and a belief in the power of continuous learning and adaptation.
And it involves recognizing that the infinite game, it doesn't offer any guarantees. There are no finish lines, no clear-cut victories. It's about playing the game to stay in the game, to make a lasting contribution that goes beyond your own time on the field.
It's a fundamental shift in perspective that challenges those traditional notions of success and leadership. And it's a journey that involves embracing uncertainty, learning from our failures, and always striving to be better.
We've talked about the importance of worthy rivals, the pitfalls of cause blindness, and the need for that existential flexibility. Sinek also highlights the role of courage in leading with an infinite mindset. What does courage look like in this context?
Courage in the infinite game, it's more than just taking risks. It's about challenging conventional wisdom, about embracing a different way of thinking. It's about standing up for your convictions, even when they're unpopular, even when they go against the grain.
He uses the example of CVS, again, the pharmacy chain that made the bold decision to stop selling cigarettes, even though it meant potentially losing revenue. That decision, while courageous, might seem illogical from a purely finite perspective.
Right. But from an infinite perspective, it makes perfect sense. It aligns with their just cause of promoting health and well-being. And it shows their commitment to playing the long game, even if it means sacrificing some short-term profits.
It reminds us that playing the infinite game often requires making tough choices that defy conventional wisdom. It's about putting that long-term vision ahead of immediate expediency, even when it's difficult.
And it means having the courage to stand up for what you believe is right, even when it's unpopular, even when it's controversial. Sinek argues that this type of courage is essential for creating a more ethical and sustainable world.
Now, Sinek also explores how these principles of the infinite game they can be applied beyond the business world. He argues that an infinite mindset can transform our personal lives, our relationships, how we approach learning and personal growth. What does that look like in practice?
It means shifting our focus from outcomes to the process, from winning to growing. It's about adopting a mindset of continuous learning, of always striving to become a better version of ourselves, not just achieving those external markers of success.
He contrasts, what he calls finite parenting, which often emphasizes those outward signs of achievement, like grades or getting into a prestigious college, with an infinite approach that focuses on helping kids discover their passions, develop their unique talents.
It's about nurturing a love of learning for its own sake, not just as a means to an end. And it's about instilling in them the value of service, of contributing to something larger than themselves.
It's about giving them the tools and the mindset to navigate the complexities of life's infinite game.
Exactly. And this shift in perspective, it can extend to our relationships as well. Instead of viewing friendships as transactional or competitive, an infinite mindset encourages us to build those deeper, more meaningful connections.
It's about being present, offering support, being there for each other through those tough times. Recognizing that the true value of a relationship lies not in what we get out of it, but in the shared experience itself.
And it's about applying these principles to our own personal growth. Embracing an infinite mindset means being open to new experiences, learning from our mistakes, and constantly striving to become better versions of ourselves.
It's about acknowledging that life is a journey, not a destination, and that the real joy comes from the process of learning, growing, and contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
And it means embracing the uncertainty, challenging our own limitations, and never giving up on making a positive impact on the world.
Welcome back. Diving into Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game with you has been, well, really thought-provoking. The excerpts you brought to the table have sparked some great conversations.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And you mentioned this metaphor that Sinek uses, building a cathedral, to illustrate what it means to operate with that infinite mindset. I think it's a perfect place to pick up our discussion.
It is such a powerful image, isn't it? I mean, think about the sheer scale, the aspiration involved in creating something like a magnificent cathedral. It's a project that spans generations. It requires this shared vision, unwavering dedication, and this understanding that, well, the people who start it might never see it finished.
It really instills a sense of humility, right?
Yeah.
Devoting your life's work to something that might not fully come to fruition until long after you're gone.
Exactly. And that, I think, captures the essence of an infinite game. We're participating in something much larger than ourselves, a cause that transcends our individual ambitions and even our lifespans. It's like those who laid the first stones of a cathedral. They weren't driven by personal glory. They were driven by contributing to a vision that would benefit generations to come.
Such a beautiful analogy. So how does this metaphor connect to those principles we've been exploring? The just cause, trusting teams, that existential flexibility.
Well, let's start with the just cause. Building a cathedral, I mean, it requires a clear and compelling vision that unites everyone involved. It's not just about stacking bricks and mortar. It's about crafting a space, a sacred sanctuary that inspires awe, that nurtures a community, that serves a higher purpose.
And that shared sense of purpose, that feeling of contributing to something greater, I think that's what fuels the dedication, the perseverance that's needed to sustain such a massive undertaking.
Oh, absolutely. And this brings us to, well, the importance of those trusting teams, right? Constructing a cathedral, it demands this incredibly high level of collaboration, coordination, reliance among the architects, the masons, the artisans, everyone involved. Each person plays a critical role. They depend on the expertise and the integrity of others to bring that vision to life.
They have to communicate effectively, share their knowledge openly, and be able to adapt to unexpected obstacles. There's no room for ego or cutthroat competition in a project like that.
And that leads us to that existential flexibility, right? Think about it. Over the centuries it took to build some of these cathedrals, new tools, techniques, materials, they emerged. Those master builders, they had to be open to those advancements, willing to adapt their plans, embrace innovation to ensure the structure's integrity, its longevity.
It wasn't about rigidly sticking to a blueprint. It was about having the wisdom, the adaptability to change course when needed, while still staying true to that overall vision.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Maintaining that fidelity to the just cause, but remaining flexible in the face of those ever-changing circumstances. I think this metaphor reminds us that building anything truly meaningful, whether it's a business, a movement, a fulfilling life, it requires that same blend of commitment and adaptability.
It makes you think about the legacy we're creating. What kind of impact do we want to have on the world? What are those structures, those cathedrals that we're building that will outlast us?
Such powerful questions to consider, and Sinek encourages us to ask them, not just in our professional lives, but in every aspect of our lives. How are we building cathedrals in our families, in our communities, even in our personal pursuits? What are the values, the principles we're laying as the foundation?
This metaphor has certainly given me a lot to reflect on. It's shifted my perspective, from focusing on those immediate wins to considering the long-term impact of my actions.
And that's the power of the infinite game mindset, isn't it? It invites us to play a different game altogether, one where the emphasis is on contributing to something bigger than ourselves, on creating a legacy that transcends our own time. It's a challenging path, for sure, but also a profoundly rewarding one.
Our deep dive into the infinite game has been incredibly enlightening. We've explored the core principles, analyzed compelling examples, unpacked thought-provoking metaphors. As we wrap up, is there anything else that stands out to you as particularly impactful or relevant for our listener?
For me, it's the reminder that the infinite game, it's not about reaching some ultimate victory, some final destination. It's about the journey itself, the ongoing process of learning, of growing, of striving to make a positive contribution.
It's about embracing those challenges, those setbacks, seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow, and never losing sight of that just cause that drives us.
As we conclude our exploration, I want to encourage our listener to think about the infinite games that they are playing in their own lives. What are your just causes? Who are your worthy rivals? How are you building those cathedrals that will stand the test of time?
And remember, the infinite game, it's not about winning or losing. It's about continuing to play, adapting, contributing to something larger than yourself. And in that pursuit, you'll find the real meaning, the fulfillment that comes from embracing an infinite mindset.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep playing the infinite game.
And remember, these 10 key takeaways from Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game.
Number 1, distinguish the game. Figure out if you're in a finite game with a clear winner or an infinite game that has no end.
Number 2, define your just cause. Create a clear, specific, and inspiring vision that goes beyond just those short-term goals.
Number 3, build those trusting teams. Foster that psychological safety. Encourage vulnerability, open communication, and collaboration.
Number 4, beware of ethical fading. Hold on to your ethical principles, especially when you're under pressure to deliver those quick results.
Number 5, embrace worthy rivals. See your competitors as sources of inspiration and motivation to constantly improve.
Number 6, fight cause blindness. Be open to different perspectives, even those that challenge your own beliefs.
Number 7, develop that existential flexibility. Embrace change, adapt your strategies to stay relevant in an ever-changing world.
Number 8, lead with courage. Challenge the conventional way of thinking and prioritize creating long-term value for everyone involved, not just shareholders.
Number 9, apply the infinite mindset to all of life. Take these principles beyond your work and apply them to your personal relationships, how you parent, and even how you approach learning.
And number 10, focus on continuous play. Strive to make a lasting impact that extends beyond your own time in the game.
By putting these takeaways into action, you can shift your mindset and create a more fulfilling, impactful life. Thanks for listening.